Hey everyone, it's me, and today let's watch The Game Theorists. Yeah. Let's start.
Hey theorists,
Hey.
MatPat here. So recently I got to interview Dr. Anthony Fauci, who for the past 18 months has been on the front lines of all things science as it relates to the coronavirus crisis.
Science!
Roll the clips. What are some of the common myths or misconceptions about COVID?
The biggest myth is that a substantial proportion of people still think this is a hoax and it's fake news and it's not real. That seems astounding to me.
But ever since that interview, I've been thinking nonstop about the dominoes that COVID-19 has started to topple over. The ripple effects that'll have impacts years after we're actually through this thing.
Literal years.
I mean, we see every single day in the news, headline after headline, about its effects on the film industry, about movie theaters, about small businesses. But what I wanted to focus on today is its effect on the games industry. Because
on the games
at
industry.
this point, as the US slowly starts to open up, as we inch closer and closer to vaccines, as the daily cases, I don't even know at this point. Guys, when they said to flatten the curve, they meant the x-axis. Flatten it towards the x, not the y. This is the wrong direction. Anyway, now is a time of reflecting on how far we've come.
Ah. Oh my gosh, people, please. My goodness.
And where we head to next. Because unlike a lot of other industries where COVID brought nothing but misery and lackluster sales, with gaming, it's actually been a lot more of a mixed bag. But the most fascinating thing about all of this is that the changes don't just go away when COVID disappears. The ripple effects that this thing has started are gonna resonate 5-10 years down the line, minimum. Heck, some
Yes, minimum 5-10 years down the line,
of
minimum.
the things that we're going to talk about today might have an impact decades later. And these are the sorts of things that aren't going to be tracked all the way back to 2020 when they actually started. And let me be clear, not all of this is bad news. I know that sometimes I tend to play up the doom and gloom angle for stuff that doesn't matter, like Mario Kart will kill you or Sonic is secretly slow, whatever. Doesn't matter. But when it comes to this, real world stuff affecting real world people, yeah, an honest, truthful discussion is really important.
Real world stuff, real world people, real world people's their livelihood in order to survive. Now that's important.
Because here's the fact, friends. The status quo has fundamentally changed. And we, as fans of this industry, need to know how it's changed and where it's going if we're going to continue to support this industry and the people who work in it. And on that note, here's actually one of the conclusions of the video that I'm gonna get to later, but just want to cut to the chase right now. If you're a budding game developer, coronavirus might just have opened up the most exciting opportunity of your life. 2021 is your chance. But we're gonna get to that later. So let me transform into my animated self and let's begin.
I like it. This is my animated shelf. Yeah.
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory!
Hello internet.
It feels like a lifetime away, but almost 1 year ago, we were seeing the coronavirus impact the video games industry in a pretty direct way every week. Events were getting canceled, games were getting delayed, and there was just a general uncertainty over the start of the newest console generation. Would the PS5 and Xbox Series X be able to release? Would the industry want them to release? Would anyone actually be there to buy them? Sure, there were production issues, with factories shutting down or having reduced capacities, but the biggest worry, and the reason for a huge dip in the stock market in March, was the worry about the economy in general. In order for a console to sell well, there have to be consumers with money to buy it. And the fear was that if everyone was out of a job at the end of the year, people would be spending less money on games, affecting both the sale of individual games as well as the popularity of these two new consoles. Of course, we now have the benefit of hindsight, and we can address all of that uncertainty. Were those analysts right? As it turns out, no. In fact, if anything, the opposite wound up being true. COVID actually helped video games. games. 2020 wound up being a record-setting year in terms of video game sales. According to a report from the NPD Group, video game spending in June of 2020 hit a 10-year high, with total sales of video game systems, games, and accessories totaling $1.18 billion. That is
Wow. I mean, people are stuck at home, so they will want to find something to do. Games is a good way. Yeah.
a significant jump from $953 million the previous year. Back in the early days of March, the line of thinking was something like this. Recession and quarantine is going to mean less expendable income in consumers' pockets, which in turn is going to equal less money to spend on video games. But as it turned out, things went a lot more like recession and quarantine equals closure of local businesses and stuck in the house with fewer reasons to go out and spend money, which meant more expendable income for things to do at home, like video games. This can actually be seen in the way that stock prices for video games have moved throughout the year. One of the easiest ways to track how the video game industry is doing as a whole is to look at something known as an index fund.
The index fund!
Funds that bundle together a bunch of like-minded stocks for people who want to bet on the future of an entire industry, rather than trying to pick and choose specific companies. So instead of saying, I predict that Nintendo is going to go up and Blizzard is going to go down, you're instead betting on the whole of the industry. When it comes to the video game industry, the biggest index fund is known as ESPO, which in March dipped by 27%. However, it had completely recovered that loss by April, and by the start of September, it had nearly doubled compared to its low point in March. Now, that alone would be impressive, but what's even more incredible is looking at gaming index fund performance relative to the year before. Whereas the rest of the stock market was up 7% by the end of 2020, which you gotta say is not bad for a year rocked by turmoil, gaming index funds like ESPO, Hero, Gamer, and Nerd, yes, those are absolutely real stock tickers, just look them up, those
Hero, Nerd, Gamer, Espo, okay.
have all gone
These people are just clever.
up by as much as 83%. 83%! In other words, COVID was actually good for the games industry as a whole.
For the game industry, wow! Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness, I didn't know that.
At least in the short term. Stick a pin in that, we're going to come back to it. All of this is indicative of the first major change that coronavirus brought on. A second coming of casual gamers and an increased respect for the games industry. I don't know about you, but when my mother-in-law starts calling me up asking what an e-sport is in the middle of quarantine, you know that there's a change
How familiar are you with South Korea?
brewing. Here's a great chart to demonstrate this. This is web search interest for the term Nintendo Switch. Notice how every year since its release in March of 2017, there have been two spikes. One during Black Friday shopping and one during the week of Christmas. But notice how this year there's a spike right there in March. Strange, right? Now let me overlay this graph. This is search interest for the word quarantine. Literally the week before. As businesses closed and people got locked down in their houses, they quickly began looking for sources of entertainment and found video games. And also Tiger King, but mostly video games. As our real world stagnated, more and more people came to discover and appreciate the virtual one. Companies began creating merch lines in Animal Crossing to promote their products in real life. Concerts were held not in arenas, but in Fortnite. Institutions like colleges held graduation ceremonies in Minecraft, and museums taught classes in Animal Crossing. Jackbox games played over Zoom became the new nightclubs. ESPN wasn't airing new games in stadiums, they were airing top basketball players duking it out in NBA 2K. In short, many people who had only been lightly exposed to games in the past suddenly became gamers overnight. The pandemic
Gamers overnight.
brought with it an influx of casual gamers that hadn't been seen since the heyday of Wii Bowling. Think it's a
Wii
coincidence
Bowling.
that Fall Guys was such a huge hit this past year? Or Among Us? Casual games that are easy to play but with high skill ceilings. Social and fun to play with friends or with strangers. Bright and colorful with goofy looking characters. All things to take us away from the dreary reality of a virus-soaked world. Get us to laugh at a time when humor was so desperately needed. And whereas Fall Guys required some platforming ability for it to to stay interesting, Among Us required nothing of its players, which is why it was the one that was able to reign supreme. Oh yeah, and seeing the smash hit of these two games, you know that the AAA market is going to try to replicate the successes of these as soon as they can. So expect these bright primary color aesthetics to be showing up in a lot of games over the next 2 years.
Bright colors!
But hold the celebration, friends, because we've only talked about half the story. Everything that we've talked about so far has been about the consumer side of the equation, how much money people are spending on video games, and how gaming has grown in its player base. Now it's time to talk about the more important part of the equation, the creation of those video games. And here's where things start to take a little bit of a turn. Now, obviously, there were delays in game releases. No big surprises there. But what's easy to overlook is how one big delay in a console release year can shape the industry for years to come. The need to push Halo Infinite into 2021 seems to have really set the Xbox Series X back a good ways behind the PS5, with data showing that the PS5 captured 65% of the global market in 2020. Sony sold 4.48 million units of the PS5, as opposed to Xbox's 2.4 million. Sony nearly doubled the performance of Microsoft. While people online were showing off their playthroughs of PlayStation titles like Miles Morales, Demon's Souls, or heck, Bugsnax, not a particularly deep roster by any means, Xbox players were making memes of their consoles overheating. And that means that Microsoft is now having to play a big game of catch-up to promote and sell their newest system. One bad year with one major delay may have just shaped the entire course of this console generation. But what may actually be more meaningful and more impactful to the industry are the canceled industry events like E3 back in June and Tokyo Game Show in September. Now,
E3 and Tokyo Game Show.
now, you might be thinking E3 being canceled is no big deal. And yeah, I'll admit I already practically watched the entire event streamed on Twitch. Pretty much every company at this point has come up with their own streaming events to get their game announcements out there. So why does it matter? Well, it matters a lot to the association that organizes and runs E3, the ESA, the Entertainment Software Association. Besides running E3 every year, the ESA has played a pretty important role historically in keeping the games industry self-policing, like creating the ESRB ratings system during the 1990s moral panic around video games. They were the ones able to get video game makers to put warning labels on their own product so that the government didn't have to get involved. Back in 1994, there was actual talk of passing a Video Games Rating Act, which would have authorized the government to fulfill the role of rating video games. In the end, the legislation never passed. Instead of a government office deciding what video games can and can't be released, we have the ESRB rating system, thanks in large part to the ESA. More recently, they've been lobbying Congress in support of loot boxes. When the Protecting Children from Abusive Games Act was introduced in 2019, the ESA contacted the senator who introduced the bill, saying, quote, "Numerous countries determined that loot boxes do not constitute gambling. We look forward to sharing with the senator the tools and information the industry already provides that keeps the control of in-game spending in parents' hands. Parents already have the ability to limit or prohibit in-game purchases with easy-to-use parental controls. Take from that what you will." Quote,
Wow. I got to say, that is a very, very, very long paragraph. That's one sentence, by the way.
quote-unquote educating members of Congress is a big part
Wait, sorry. Is that actually a one sentence? I'm so sorry. I wasn't paying attention.
of
Sorry.
why the ESA exists. According to one report, the ESA spent $1.1 million on lobbying in just the first quarter of 2011. For comparison, that is more than Facebook and Google spent on lobbying that entire year. Of course, Facebook and Google have grown quite a bit since then, but still, that is an impressive statistic. And hiring lobbyists costs money, and that money has to come from somewhere, and historically, a significant portion of the ESA's revenue has come from events like E3, which admittedly was already on a downward trend, but coronavirus absolutely decimated that. If the ESA loses E3 as an ongoing revenue source, it could also impact their ability to lobby Congress on behalf of the games industry. And regardless of whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, it is certainly a thing that will absolutely impact the industry for years to come. Another industry conference that's less widely discussed, but probably more important, is GDC. If you've never heard of GDC, well, it's probably because it's not for you. The letters stand for Game Developers Conference, and it's an annual gathering of game developers from around the globe to get together to discuss the latest tools, technology, and techniques that they're using for making games. So you're probably thinking, big deal, a bunch of 400-level college lectures about highly specific stuff in video games. It's another thing that can just
highly specific stuff in
Be
gaming.
streamed, and technically you'd be right. GDC did in fact do virtual talks in 2020. However, there's another part of GDC that's just as, if not more important than the presentations, and that's the networking. You see, GDC is an industry gathering where companies can gather and have business meetings, or start the conversations that lead to future business meetings. For instance, Microsoft has people from the id at Xbox program who go to GDC to talk to indie developers about getting their games onto Xbox, and plenty of indie developers go to GDC to talk to publishers, both big and small, about the possibility of getting funding to publish their game. Fun fact, one member of Team Theorist actually went through that entire process several years ago. What started as a 10-minute tech demo and a dream by 4 indie game devs fresh out of university turned into a relationship with a game publisher that allowed them to expand their team to over a dozen people and spend the next 3 years working on a fully fledged game. No exaggeration, that week-long trip to GDC and the personal meetings that happened there were life-changing. Well, GDC did do
True, literal life-changing with networking involved.
online talks this year. A live stream isn't the kind of thing that can replace that sort of networking. How many students aren't going to get the job as a concept artist or a programmer when they would have if they had just met a recruiter at an event like this? How many indie studios aren't going to find a publisher to fund them because they didn't have the opportunity to meet the right people? The impact of an event not happening can be invisible to a lot of us, but it doesn't make the impact any less real. So in general, the takeaway here is that there is a lot of talent in the market right now, all of them looking for work. So find teams, promote yourself. Heck, use the comments of this video to promote yourself or a new project that you're working on. Share this video so that you have a forum to find each other. Take this time now to start a dream project and find others like you. It might feel like you're alone, but you are not alone. And you guys are stronger working together to get through this difficult transition period. And this leads me to the last big point, which is that video game development in general has slowed down, and we need to be okay with that. According to a GamesIndustry.biz article posted on March 5th, the effects of the coronavirus on game development in East Asia had already started to crop up as early as February. According to Alexander Fernandez, the CEO of Streamline Media Group, a company that provides game development services to larger game companies, quote, "You can see the virus is taking over the industry. Pretty much every meeting I had ended up with some form of, do you have resources? I need help. Things are crazy right now." This was a report from February 12th. For reference, the first reported case of coronavirus in Europe was February 14th. That is how early the virus had started to shake the foundations of video game development.
Shake the foundation of the industry.
And this is one of those places where the games industry can't really catch up. If those workers are out of commission for a period of several months, or are less productive due to not being able to work together in the same office, that's not something you can just make up for once everything comes back to normal. We were lucky. For as bad as 2020 was, the games overall were really solid. Maybe not the best, but far from the worst. And we were able to get so many of them because they were games that had been in the works for a long time. But this year, don't get upset when the release calendar starts looking a bit thin. This is the catch-up year as the industry makes up for lost time. Which leads me to my overall conclusion, and the one that I talked about at the very beginning of this video. If you're an indie dev, now is your chance. Everything that we've talked about today is leading to this being your big break. This is the gap year, where you can be the biggest title in the market. Just like with
MatPat Theory Simulator.
Fall Guys and Among Us last year, as the massive companies continue to try and get their ships back on course, you can be the speedboats swooping in to be first to port. This is the opening where you can become the most talked about game. Because we're not done yet. The pandemic is still going on. We're closer, but we're still not through the woods. And because of it, there's still a need for entertainment. There's just less entertainment available to fill that need, which means that it's an opening for you and your idea. The pieces are in place for you. The talent is out there looking for projects to collaborate on. Hopefully they're down in the comments talking about exactly that. The consumers are still stuck inside their homes waiting for something to play. You know what people are looking for because I talked about the trends in the games industry that were successful. Now they just need the games. The question is, will you be the one to deliver? COVID has been terrible for countless numbers of reasons, but it might just be the most positive thing to helping your next game idea get its big break. But hey, did you know that video games weren't the only market positively affected by the coronavirus? Did you know that between March 15th and April 6th, the number of active monthly listeners of ambient music more than doubled? And the number of people streaming classical music was up by over 500%? Yeah! Yeah, stream that Chopin. Who's a Liszt stan with me? Franz Liszt, you know, composer, one of my personal favorites. Stats like these show that, hey, we're all looking for a way to chill out these days. And if you're like me, you probably want a nice quality pair of earbuds to drown out the world's utter chaos, especially when you're stuck in a house with other people for months on end, one of whom is a toddler that sleeps for 2 hours in the middle of the day and can wake up at the drop of a hat. Earbuds are the things that are gonna help keep you sane. And Raycon, our sponsor for today's episode, is you treating yourself to a little piece of premium sanity at a not so premium price. Raycon designs premium wireless audio for half the price, without compromise, which means that when your stimulus check comes in, you can treat yourself to a pair of amazing earbuds and still have enough money for way too many packs of Pokemon cards. Hollow Charizard ain't gonna unwrap himself, my friends. Raycon's earbuds give you 6 hours of playtime, seamless Bluetooth pairing, more bass, and a more compact design for a comfortable noise-isolating fit. Plus, they offer their wireless earbuds in a range of fun colors and patterns with a variety of fit options. No dangling wires or stems here, my friends. In fact, they are so sure that you're gonna love your Raycons that they have a 45-day free return policy so you can return them for yourself. So click the link in the description box below or go to buyraycon.com/MattPat, MATPAT, to get yourself 15% off your Raycon purchase. Being able to crank up your Franz Liszt while your toddler sleeps for 2 hours in the room next door is totally worth it. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed this video as much as I do, because this video is very knowledgeable and very interesting to watch for me. Yeah, if you do like this video, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to my channel, and comment down below if you have anything to share with us. Don't forget to follow my channel as well, and I sincerely appreciate all of your support. Thank you. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching. Thank you so much for watching this video. This video came out from the YouTube channel The Game Theorist in the year 2021, which is this year. If you do like this video, please remember to watch more of the videos and show support for their work. They are just amazing individuals, and their videos are just fun to watch. I'm personally a huge fan of their work, so yeah. And I hope that you enjoyed this video as much as I do, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye! Thank you so much, and I'll see you in my next video. Subscribe! Bye bye!